Tonight on Primetime, strain and hostility in the Strait of Hormuz continue. The US enforces its naval blockade, seizing vessels, while Iran is also restricting access. So are we drifting closer to another confrontation? Good evening. Strains between the United States and Iran are once again in focus as a fragile pause in hostilities faces growing pressure, rising fresh doubts over whether diplomacy can hold or if the situation risks slipping further out of control.
Tensions between the United States and Iran remain high, with uncertainty clouding prospects for a new round of peace talks and the future of a fragile ceasefire. US President Donald Trump says Washington will not lift its naval blockade on Iranian ports until a deal is reached with Tehran. In posts on Truth Social, Trump said the US is in a strong position and insisted that continued pressure on Iran would force a deal. The blockade, imposed about a week ago, has already disrupted regional shipping. According to US Central Command, American forces have turned away dozens of vessels and seized an Iranian-flagged cargo ship attempting to pass through restricted waters. Tehran has condemned the move as piracy and a breach of the ceasefire. At the same time, Iran has maintained restrictions on the Strait of Hormuz, a critical global oil route, heightening concerns over energy supplies and driving up prices. Shipping traffic through the strait has fallen sharply, with many vessels avoiding the area due to security risks. Diplomatic efforts remain uncertain. A second round of talks is expected in Islamabad, but neither side has fully committed. US Vice President J.D. Vance, who is set to lead the American delegation, has yet to leave Washington, while Iran says it currently has no plans to attend. Iranian Parliament Speaker Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf has rejected negotiations under threats, accusing Washington of trying to force a surrender and warning that Tehran is prepared to escalate if necessary. Despite the standoff, Trump says a deal could be reached relatively quickly and would surpass the 2015 Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, which he withdrew from during his first term. For now, both sides continue to trade accusations of ceasefire violations, while the chances of renewed talks and broader de-escalation remain unclear.
Well, let's hear more now on the Iranian perspective. AnewZ's Toraj Shirililo reports now directly from Tehran.
Iran's parliament speaker, Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf, has ruled out renewed negotiations with the United States in Islamabad on Tuesday, saying Tehran will not engage under what he called the shadow of threats. He stressed that Iran will not sit at what he described as a table of surrender, while a two-week ceasefire between Tehran and Washington is due to expire on Wednesday. In a post on X, Ghalibaf said US President Donald Trump is attempting to turn negotiations into a table of surrender by imposing a blockade and violating the ceasefire to justify the renewed hostilities. He added that Iran has spent the past 2 weeks preparing to deploy new options on the battlefield. Ghalibaf, who led Iran's delegation during the first round of talks in Islamabad earlier this month, issued the warning as tensions escalate ahead of the ceasefire deadline, including reports of US naval forces opening fire on an Iranian cargo vessel in the Sea of Oman on Sunday. Meanwhile, Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi held calls with Pakistani Foreign Minister Mohammad Ishaq for the second time in 24 hours, as well as Russia's top diplomat Sergei Lavrov and his Iraqi counterpart Fuad Hossein ahead of the ceasefire expiry. An informed Iranian source told AnewZ that all parties are engaged in intense diplomatic exchanges, adding that any new talks would depend on the lifting of the US blockade on Iran's southern ports. For now, with the ceasefire nearing its end, uncertainty remains over whether diplomacy can resume or tensions will escalate further. Toraj Shirililo, Tehran, for AnewZ.
Well, for more on this now, we're joined by our very own Anastasia Lavrina. Anastasia, always great to have you. Thanks for coming in to talk to us about this. let's start with the basics. What are the latest on the prospects, the realistic prospects for US-Iran talks right now?
Well, Guy, thank you so much. I guess this is number one topic in all global media, and I can say that the latest picture is mixed, but still diplomatically alive. We can hear some official statements from Iranian side or from the United States of America, and as we already know, the 2-week ceasefire agreement to end on Tuesday evening, and there is a key question whether it's going to be prolonged or renewed or any kind of deal to be reached. So much depends on the planned round of talks to take place in Islamabad, Pakistan on Wednesday. And from the official sources of the United States, it seems that America is ready to send its delegation to Islamabad. And J.D. Vance himself is going to lead a new delegation. Actually, the people who participated in the previous round of talks is going to take place in the next round of talks, but only in case of agreement Iranian side to join the talks. And from the Iranian side, there is still no any clear message whether Iran is planning to send a delegation to Islamabad or not. Much depends on the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps and how they will approach to this situation. Before it was we could read some messages that they agreed to participate in the second round of talks, but again, no any clear message whether the delegation is ready to travel to Islamabad to participate in that talks. The position of the American leader, Donald Trump, is also clear that the ceasefire, its deadline is a key pressure point, but if there is no any extension of the ceasefire or no deal, then America, the situation will have a tough consequences for Iranian side. What's happened just recently, I mean now the Iranian cargo ship was seized by the United States. It also affected the situation because Iran responded that it has a right to have even the military response on what's happened there. But the situation around the Strait of Hormuz is also worrying for many countries in the region and for the global world, as Donald Trump is saying that it's not going to unblock the Strait of Hormuz until any kind of deal is reached with Iran. But Iran is also saying that they are not ready to unblock this Strait of Hormuz if no any deal is reached with the United States and if there is no any changes from the American side. So much indeed will depend whether that talks will take place tomorrow in Islamabad, Pakistan. If not, this scenario, the experts already predict number of scenarios, and the worst one, it's a new war in the region, a new escalation.
Yeah, and nobody wants that. But it's quite extraordinary, isn't it? We've had blockades from one side, blockades from another, blockade upon blockade, seemingly. How have the blockades, particularly the most recent ones, impacted the shape of the ongoing diplomacy?
Well, the consequences is visible for all countries in the region, for Iran also, and even for the United States, because the price of oil is rising. When the escalation started, before that actually, the oil price was just about $60–65. Then during the escalation, it reached 100. And after the statements made by two sides about the possible unblockade of the Strait of Hormuz and the escalation, the price of oil barrel now varies in between of $90–95. So in the case of any new escalation, it will definitely affect the oil price first, and some experts already predict that the price may reach $120–140 per barrel. That's indeed very bad for the economy of European countries, Asian countries, because most of the countries depends on the operation of the Strait of Hormuz, and the countries in the region itself, from the Gulf region, I mean the Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Qatar, their economy depends on the oil export, and due to the blockade of the Strait of Hormuz, there is no any possibility. And the situation is still very tough from the perspective of the escalation. As I mentioned before, when the Iranian cargo ship was seized by the United States. So any such kind of incident may lead to a new war and escalation. And the Strait of Hormuz is indeed very important artery. 20% of oil is passing from that strait, and 20% of the global LNG, then the fertilizers. So it affects not only the energy market, but also the production side. I mean, for many companies, for many economies in the world, the operation of this strait affects the economy, development, and prosperity. China's economy much depends on that. So we can see that China is indeed very worried about the future economic prosperity, and the operation of this line that plays a significant role. It's blocked from two sides, and neither side is ready to open if another side is doing the same. And it's not only about opening of the Strait of Hormuz. There is a number of points presented by two sides, United States and Iran, to reach the final agreement and the peace deal. There are a number of points to be achieved during the discussion. It's a nuclear program, it's a ballistic missile development program in Iran, which United States is putting on the top of questions to be discussed and agreed. And Iran is not ready to do that.
I mean, that would be, sorry, but that would be an extraordinarily difficult negotiation to deliver in normal circumstances, let alone against the backdrop of this crisis, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Two sides have to come up with some solutions. And when I ask the experts from two sides whether there is any point the country is ready to negotiate and agree, or whether United States or Iran is ready to bypass any of the points from the agreement, the answer is clear: no. They have to be reached any type of agreement. So probably it's too early to speak about the new deal to be signed by two sides, but the ceasefire extension, that's what it's needed to be achieved now, as Donald Trump is quite clear in his message. He's saying that if there is no extension, then the consequences will be tough for Iran. But United States itself have these negative consequences from the blockade of the Strait of Hormuz, from the, let's say, situation in the region itself, from the negative outcomes economic development it has, and the spending on war United States have reached so far since the beginning of the escalation. So I don't think that Donald Trump himself is happy to prolong this war, but what we see today, indeed, we have to expect very tough negotiations. Last time it was almost 21 hours, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, yeah.
So this time, probably, if this round of talks happen in Islamabad, Pakistan, it will probably require much more time for two sides to come up with any kind of solution.
Well, the world is watching and waiting, Anastasia. Well, what about this part of the world? We're here in Baku. What do countries like Azerbaijan, like others in this region, see when they look at the situation at the moment? What is the analysis, if you like, of countries like Azerbaijan?
Well, Azerbaijan, since the beginning, has a very clear position. We are not going to participate in the war, to join any part, and at the same time, we will not allow its territory or airspace to be used against a third party. So we continue to follow this rule, but at the same time, we cannot ignore the fact that we have the mutual border with Iran, and any kind of escalation will also have its own consequences for the region, for the South Caucasus, and also for Azerbaijan. So Azerbaijan indeed supports the peaceful resolution of the conflict, the dialogue to take place in the brotherly Pakistan, and Pakistan has a very strong position here, very strong stance in the region and in the Muslim world. So we cannot ignore the fact that it's a very positive side that the talk is taking place in Islamabad, in Pakistan. But what we see today, from one perspective, of course, it's a negative aspects and the blockade of the Strait of Hormuz. But from the other side, Azerbaijan is trying also and doing its best to contribute to the process of stabilizing the energy market and the economic prosperity, as it's Azerbaijan, the country which can guarantee the security and peaceful transit of the cargoes through its territories, and the projects like the Middle Corridor, the Southern Gas Corridor, and Azerbaijan itself as a reliable energy partner for a number of countries in Europe. Now it's being highlighted by many countries in the world. So Azerbaijan, I wouldn't say using its opportunity, but contributing as much as it can to stabilize, let's say, global economy and the global energy market, contributing from these perspectives. And as as a peace builder in the region, of course, Azerbaijan is willing to see the positive outcomes from the round of talks between Washington and Tehran. Let's see how it's being developed next.
Yeah, indeed. Something else that's very important to this region and others is connectivity. Transport corridors, not just the Zangezur corridor, but the many other relationships and routes and partnerships that the country and the region has. What is the risk of connectivity being impacted, and has that risk profile changed over the last few weeks?
The risk of connectivity, I guess first it's from the Strait of Hormuz point of view, because there we cannot see any kind of flows within the last months even. Time to time is being opened, but still it's not enough to stabilize the energy market and the economy, global economy now I mean. So it indeed affects the trade flows and cooperation in the Gulf region and in the Middle East as well. The second point is the South Caucasus and the Caspian region as well. Much depends now from the smooth operation of the projects which we can see here in the region. The middle corridor, as I already mentioned, the China's Belt and Road, the smooth trade flows from Azerbaijan to Turkey and further to Europe. Zangezur corridor is still on the agenda, but I guess we will have more broad discussion of that after the finishing of the war in the Middle East, as America is indeed taking very important part in the future development of TRIP. But as for now, much depends on the countries like Azerbaijan, Central Asian countries. By the way, Central Asia itself is much depends on the energy flows through the Strait of Hormuz. And China, as I mentioned before, some experts may say that China may benefit from this situation, positioning itself as a rising global power, while the power of the United States is declining on the sidelines of this war in the Middle East in some parts of the world. But we cannot ignore that China's economies, it's much depends on the import of the fossil fuels and the smooth transition of energy flows. So what we see today is China is trying to reinvest to its own economy. And by the way, investment flows now it's also disturbed in many of the countries. Countries are not able to plan its own policy to avoid any kind of inflations to happen on the sideline of the fuel costs and the price of oil we see in the energy market. So all countries in our region, Azerbaijan, Georgia, Turkey, and Central Asian states are trying to maximize its coordination. And one of the key aspects of this coordinative work we could see on the sidelines of Antalya Diplomacy Forum just recently, when there was the informal meeting of the heads of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs from the Organization of Turkic States countries, who also agreed to unite and reinforce the coordination in between of the states when it comes to the energy, trade and transport cooperation. I guess what we see today in the Middle East, it's also affects and probably from some perspective positively affects the way of coordination and cooperation between the countries.
A lot at stake, all eyes on this next round of talks. Anastasia, always a pleasure to have you in the studio. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, new claims of rapid gains are coming out of Moscow, but on the ground the fighting remains intense, with both sides stepping up strikes and little sign of the war ceasing.
Russia's top military official is claiming significant advances in Ukraine. On state television Tuesday, Chief of the General Staff Valery Gerasimov asserted Russian forces have seized substantial new territory this year and are pushing forward on all fronts. Kyiv has yet to officially respond to these claims.
During March to April, Russian forces took control of 34 settlements and about 700 square kilometers of territory. In total, since the beginning of the year, 80 settlements and more than 1,700 square kilometers of territory have come under our control. The liberation of the Luhansk People's Republic has been fully completed. The offensive by formations and military units of the joint group of forces is being conducted in all directions.
But as Russia presses its offensive, Ukraine is intensifying its own long-range attacks. Satellite imagery from Monday shows smoke rising from Russia's Black Sea port of Tuapse after a Ukrainian drone strike. Russian officials confirmed a fire and one fatality. Ukraine's military says its strike hit vital reservoir tanks at the Tuapse oil refinery, a crucial oil export hub. This was the second drone attack on Tuapse this month. Meanwhile, fierce fighting continues across Ukraine. Russian forces have launched drone attacks, causing 8 fires in Kherson and hitting multi-story buildings. In the northeast, early Tuesday drone strikes on Sumy left at least 15 people injured, damaging buildings and destroying vehicles. With both sides escalating attacks and claiming battlefield successes, the conflict in Ukraine shows no signs of slowing.
Well, to get a clearer picture from a military perspective, we're joined now by Andriy Ordinovich, retired colonel of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, who's joining us from an undisclosed location in the western part of Ukraine. Colonel, thank you very much indeed for joining us. As I just said there, we're not disclosing your precise location for security reasons. We do thank you very much for finding a way to connect with us tonight. You've heard the claims then from Moscow. How credible are these Russian claims of rapid territorial gains?
First and foremost, thank you for having me. The General Gerasimov already or continuously trying to pretend and present the information that they already occupied fully Lugansk Oblast, but it is not true. At least 1 or 2% of Lugansk Oblast close to the Kremina forest is under control of units of Ukrainian armed forces. I could agree only with this general that Russia is making some incremental gains since the beginning of 2026. But it is a tactical gains. They are not achieving their core strategic objectives. If we will make a comparison from the January 2026 up to the full month of March, I would say this incremental gains going down. If I mention that in January, they've been able to occupy temporarily 100% only 246 square kilometers. In February, they've been able to do it only 123 or 24. But in February, it became even less incremental, only 5.6 square kilometers. I disagree with General Gerasimov that they are gaining a huge territory of Ukraine. And this grading advances often measures if 100 meters or dozen square kilometers, not much.
So they're firmly disputed then. But what about the current pace of fighting? What does that tell us about the trajectory, the direction of this war at this time?
From Ukrainian standpoint, we do understand this kind of line of contact is very big, and probably the biggest one in any recent war of aggression or war or military conflict. But we do have our strategy, which are directed for the strategic undermining their economy, not allow them to give more dollars or Russian rubles to fill up their war machinery. And quite successful, and in your program I heard the numbers of assets. Tuapse oil refinery, two days continuous heating, which undermine the oil refinery revenue. As for now, it is already 40% of oil refinery revenue are reduced in Russia. It means they would not have this 40% for the filling up tank of machine. But on the tactical level, they are trying to keep pressure on our the units, defense force units in the line of contacts, and getting some incremental gains is true, because they are not counting their manpower. I would say all these incremental gains are very costly. on the daily basis, Ukrainian defense forces are able to eliminate roughly 1,000, even more, military personnel killed in action and wounded in action. In total, in months, it's approaching to 35. As a last March months, it was almost 36,700 troops being eliminated. And based on our intelligence report, Russia are not able to get into the line of contact such amount. And if we look at for the Zaporizhia direction, we already noticed less military pressure on it. And they are keeping pressure in Donetsk region, Avdiivka, Chasiv Yar, they're getting force and back, and Bakhmut area, even after occupation of the city, Ukrainian forces been able to keep it. And totally right now, Ukrainian defense forces are controlling Russian are able to occupy 80% of Donetsk region. If you will comparison with the World War II figures, when a Nazi for this period of time been able to approach to Moscow and Stalingrad, returning back to Berlin, being seized in Berlin. But in the same period of time, Russia been able only to occupy, if not mistaken, maybe 22 or 23% of Donetsk region. It's mean we as a Ukrainians are gonna find to our land, because it is Ukrainian land, not Russian, and hope that our strategy will start to work in more efficient way. And when the all strategic objectives of recently raised by our Ministry of Defense to kill roughly 50,000 Russian per month, we hope it's gonna somehow formulate and recalculate Russian prospection towards this war aggression against Ukraine.
And Colonel, in terms of the future strategy, obviously we wouldn't ask you to reveal specific details, but in terms of Ukraine's long-range strikes on targets like oil infrastructure, for example, would you expect that to form a consistent part of Ukraine's short and medium-term strategy?
100%. As I mentioned it before, it is one of the elements of our strategy and strategic objectives to undermine war machine of Russia. And oil refinery, as well as defense industrial base enterprises, are key focus on it. And for the recent time, only 1 or 2 weeks, we've been confident in this strategy is work. We undermine the multi-layer air defense system, which allow it, for example, since of June 2025 until of March 2026, to eliminate roughly 500 air defense different military objectives, including the launchers, including the radars, like from S-300, S-350, or S-400, as well as Buk, as well as Tor, and numbers. And their air defense system are giving the possibility for Ukraine to elaborate even more and get more success using a mid and deep strike capabilities, what we are gaining from day-to-day basis.
And finally, Colonel, I mean, both sides will dispute the efficacy of the others' tactics, but nevertheless, it's clear that both sides are clearly continuing to escalate, continuing to put continued effort into this war. With that in mind, what does the near-term outlook actually look like militarily?
Personally, I believe it, my military leadership and entire defense forces, they are not expecting that Russia will reduce their potential and will change a plan. Even because of a recent geopolitical changing policy towards the sanction, as we know it for the last 2 months, the great power of United States decided to allow Russian to use sanction already oil, which are in the somewhere in the sea or ocean, for selling to China, for example, already 32 or 33%. And if sanction would be released somehow or simplify them, it would be more harder to Ukraine to keep their strategy and persuade Russian to stop this war of aggression and bring the better condition for Ukraine and international community for the negotiation table. It means I am not expecting any changes of strategy of Russia. We expect so-called spring summer offensive. We expect also that Russia is going to get some reserve troops in the front line to fight against Ukraine. And based on this additional gains, but we will try to persuade Russians the miscalculation and do our best with the existing strategy, including mid-term, mid-range and long-range our missile capabilities.
Colonel, thank you for your time. We appreciate your analysis very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you for having me one more time.
Okay, after the break, we'll take a look at the top business news stories shaping the day with Katie Wilson. Don't go away.
Inside Politics delves deeply into the heart of global issues shaping our world today. Join me for your go-to source of political analysis from across the region and beyond.
On World Business, we meet the boardroom leaders making market-moving decisions. And find out how leaders are dealing with continuous technological disruption. A warm welcome back to Primetime, wherever you're watching. Now, Katie Wilson has joined us with the very latest business news. Katie, what's on your agenda tonight?
Well, Guy, the refund system for Trump's tariffs has finally gone live, so we'll take a look at that as well as the latest from the Middle East and the car industry. So let's get started. First this evening, a race for refunds as thousands of US companies scramble to reclaim billions in tariffs ruled illegal by the Supreme Court. A new government system has just gone live, triggering a surge of claims with firms like toy maker Basic Fun moving fast to recover millions.
The US government's new refund system for companies to reclaim illegally collected tariffs went live on Monday and immediately triggered a rush of claims from thousands of businesses. One of them is toy maker Basic Fun. Chief Executive Jay Foreman had his team ready in a quote war room at company headquarters in Boca Raton, Florida. They were prepared to start filing when the system opened at 8 a.m. Eastern Time. The firm needed to upload more than 500 files, which can be submitted in batches.
It was hugely important because this money is very important to the company. I mean, we were charged over $7 million in tariffs last year. That took a huge chunk of our profits away, and we need those funds to reinvest this year in our product line. We needed to reinvest in our business and our people, and we needed just to keep our cash flow, steady for the year going forward.
Foreman said the past year had been a very up and down roller coaster. He says smaller firms like his faced extra pressure, unable to pass higher costs onto powerful buyers intent on keeping prices low. Leading up to Monday, Foreman had worried whether the system would work.
I was very concerned because there's over 300,000 importers that were charged tariffs. And I'm pretty concerned and was pretty concerned and still am pretty concerned that this system is going to get overloaded. So the team was here at 7 o'clock in the morning, even though we had people monitoring the portal all night to see if it opened early.
The U.S. Supreme Court in February struck down the tariffs that Donald Trump had imposed using a national emergency law. That ruling could lead to as much as $166 billion being returned to importers. As of early April, over 56,000 firms had already completed the required steps to claim about $127 billion in refunds. It's not clear how quickly the repayments will be processed.
Staying in the US, Wall Street slipped slightly as renewed tensions with Iran cast doubt over a fragile ceasefire. All three major indexes pulled back, whilst oil prices jumped sharply, adding to market jitters and dragging down big tech names like Apple and Netflix.
U.S. stocks closed slightly lower on Monday, with the Dow flat and the S&P 500 and NASDAQ each dipping about 0.25%. All three indexes are coming off a third straight week of gains, but renewed U.S.-Iran tensions put the durability of a two-week ceasefire in question. Adam Coons is Chief Investment Officer at Winthrop Capital Management.
Yeah, so today we got markets, in that digestion period of what's going on in the Middle East. Last week, we ended the week with a strong rally because there was just stronger talks about a deal being made between the U.S. and Iran, and just kind of over the weekend saw some deterioration of kind of evidence on what that would look like and if it was really going to even happen. So you're seeing stocks sell off a little bit today, and just overall kind of the pessimism is creeping back into markets today where it seemed to evaporate last week.
U.S. crude jumped more than 6.5% to settle at nearly $90 a barrel. Among the session's stock moves, communication services was the worst performing sector. Shares of Apple moved lower in extended trading after the iPhone maker named company insider John Ternus as its next CEO. Tim Cook, who has led Apple since 2011, will become the company's executive chairman. Shares of Meta shed 2.5% to snap a 9-session winning streak, its longest since October. And shares of Netflix also fell 2.5%. The stock has fallen about 12% since the streaming service last week announced its quarterly results and the departure of co-founder Reed Hastings.
Well, the impact of the war with Iran isn't just affecting the US, it's also hitting the tourism industry in South Africa. Travel disruption and rising costs are driving cancellations and cutting bookings from the Middle East, leaving tour operators and hotels scrambling to adapt as uncertainty reshapes global travel patterns.
A lot of the tour guides and tour companies is suffering as well.
Imran Ruda says travel disruptions linked to the war in the Middle East have cut deeply into his international tour guide business, which relies heavily on visitors from the Gulf region.
So in a normal season, about 60 to 80% of my bookings comes from the Middle Eastern clients. I've lost between 350 to 500,000 rand over the past few months due to the war in the Middle East alone. This has had a direct impact on my business, especially because of many of these are regular returning clients that travel annually and haven't made any plans this year due to the uncertainty.
He's not the only one feeling the impact. Hotels and travel agents are reporting cancellations, higher costs, and a sharp drop in bookings. Peter Van Eck is the chief operating officer at the Bond Hotel Group.
With the disruption with the flights and the cost of the flights inbound and domestically, we had to change tack with different hotels, focus more on domestic travel as opposed to international travel.
At Cape Town International Airport, flights continue to arrive and depart, but travel companies report changing patterns, with shorter lead times, cautious spending, and fewer premium leisure trips.
Over to Europe now, and a fresh legal challenge for Shell as climate activists in the Netherlands take the oil giant to court, demanding it halt new fossil fuel investments. This marks a new chapter in the long-running battle over emissions and the future of energy.
A Dutch climate activist group launched a new court case against Shell on Tuesday in the Netherlands. It's demanding that the British energy major end its investments in new oil and gas projects. Shell and a number of its peers want to capitalise on soaring profits from oil and gas sales following the outbreak of the Ukraine war. It has scaled back its renewable energy operations and weakened emissions targets. It told investors last year it was targeting 4 to 5% annual increase in liquefied natural gas sales over the next 5 years, and planned to sustain material oil output beyond 2030. The lawsuit was filed by Friends of the Earth Netherlands. Shell called the case unreasonable after Friends of the Earth announced plans to file the legal action last year. It said the activist group ignored the global economy's need for fossil fuels. Shell did not immediately respond to a request for comment on Tuesday. The lawsuit builds on another case brought by the activists that's been making its way through the Dutch courts for several years. In that case, an appeals judge in 2024 ruled Shell had a responsibility to reduce emissions and to protect people from global warming.
Staying in the Netherlands, Tesla is taking a major step towards self-driving cars in Europe, with its full self-driving system approved for city streets in Amsterdam. It's a first for the region, though not without concern over safety in one of the world's busiest cycling environments.
Kees Roelenschap navigates down the narrow streets of Amsterdam without his hands on the wheel of his Tesla. It follows the US carmaker getting surprise approval from the Netherlands for its supervised full self-driving or FSD system. It's a European first for city streets and could lead to more near-autonomous vehicles on the continent, although it has split opinion where supporters see it as a breakthrough and safer than regular driving, while some cyclists and politicians are mixed between caution and optimism.
But to be able to experience it firsthand here in the Netherlands, that's unreal, because I've been waiting for this moment ever since Autonomy Day in 2019, where Elon said this is going to come, and the moment's finally here.
Tesla's FSD system can steer, brake and accelerate without hands on the wheel, although a driver must remain attentive and ready to intervene. Roelenschap showed how the car first issued a warning and slowed to a stop with its hazard lights blinking. That after he gazed down at his lap rather than the road for too long. It's a precaution to avoid drivers losing focus.
I have yet to notice or encounter a difficult road situation. Here we have a lot of bikers trying to overtake us, we have bikers coming towards us, we have bikers coming from the left. What's the dangerous thing here?
The reaction to FSD is mixed in Amsterdam. The city's streets share a dense flow of bikes, trams, trucks and more. Esther van Garderen is head of the Dutch Cyclists Union, and she argues the Netherlands is a challenge for self-driving. She's concerned drivers could over-rely on the technology while paying less attention to the road.
We have quite a unique traffic system in the world where all these cyclists are, and we are not fully assured that these self-driving cars will understand the behavior of Dutch cyclists, which is quite unique.
The rollout comes as Tesla bets on driver assistance to revive slowing European sales. The EU is due to discuss approving the technology in May.
And finally, let's finish off with a little bit of sport. In Switzerland, researchers are testing an AI-powered wireless sensor system with the national ski jumping team, aiming to deliver instant feedback on technique and help athletes fine-tune their flight for longer, more precise jumps.
A new wireless sensor system using AI aims to give ski jumping coaches instant feedback, and it's helping Switzerland's national junior ski team test whether it can keep athletes in the air longer. The system is being developed at ETH Zurich. Dr. Christoph Leitner is the project's lead researcher.
We are really eager to understand and see what the sensor data will show, particularly when the athlete arrives at the jumping table. You know, this is a very short period of time, it's like 300 milliseconds, but getting a shot and the detail into the center of mass, for example, will definitely bring more information, not only for us engineers, but also for the coaches, and eventually, hopefully, for the athlete, having the coach as a filter to optimize their technique.
As this Swiss junior skier jumps, the sensors on his boots, goggles, and legs measure his takeoff force and center of gravity while in flight. The system's machine learning model also gives immediate feedback to the athlete through a vibration motor in their boot, accelerating motor learning and enhancing jump quality.
Well, we have here 3 sensors that we integrate into ski jumpers or into athletes, or that we apply on athletes to get a better impression on their movement quality and to improve the learning speed. Because imagine ski jumping is a non-cyclic sport, so a jump lasts maybe 10 to 15 seconds, and you can imagine as a ski jumper the number of jumps in your lifetime is basically limited. So what we want to do, we want to really improve and accelerate the learning speed in ski jumping.
The data could help coaches pinpoint areas where an athlete needs to adjust their posture and dynamics, ultimately improving their takeoff efficiency, a key factor in securing competitive success.
For the future, I see a hyper-connected athlete. An athlete that has basically sensors everywhere, tiny nodes that are super efficient and that capture the complexity of movement. And I hope to contribute with this system for the development of the ski jumpers of Swiss ski, and hopefully for other alpine sports or even summer sports. I can imagine to apply the sensors for running, swimming, any kinds of sports.
Wonder if we'll be seeing it at the Winter Olympics anytime soon. What do you reckon?
Amazing stuff, isn't it? Do you know, Katie, I once met the 80s British ski jumper Eddie the Eagle Edwards. Amazing guy. I'd love to have a go at that. I'm just not sure I'd have the guts. What do you think?
Well, I don't know if it's for me, but VAR's already ruined football, so I don't know if I want to bring AI into any more sports.
Very good excuse. Thank you very much indeed, Katie. Okay, after the break, a key oil pipeline to Europe nears restart, but tensions between Kyiv and Moscow threaten further disruption. What it could mean for Europe next. Stay with us.
Inside Politics delves deeply into the heart of global issues shaping our world today. Join me for your go-to source of political analysis from across the region and beyond.
On World Business, we meet the boardroom leaders making market-moving decisions. And find out how leaders are dealing with continuous technological disruption.
As America sleeps, Europe is waking, and the East has begun its day. AnewZ is right here at the center, bringing you the latest stories as they break. I'm Nadia Jani, here with you each weekday morning to share latest world news and the stories shaping our region. Across all platforms and wherever you get your news, we explore the context behind the big headlines. Live from Baku, I bring you a diverse mix of regional and international news, sport and politics for you, an audience that wants a bit more. So join me Monday to Friday for the latest headlines, expert analysis and live updates from around the world. Around the globe and live from Baku, this is Daybreak here on AnewZ.
Welcome back. You're watching Primetime. Energy tensions in Europe are back in focus as a key oil route linking Russia to EU markets edges closer to reopening, raising fresh questions over whether supply disputes between Ukraine and its neighbours can be resolved.
Druzhba pipeline can resume operations, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said, as a dispute over supplies continues between Kyiv, Moscow and European Union states. President of Ukraine said on Monday that the damaged Druzhba pipeline would be ready to operate by the end of April. The Soviet-era pipeline has been shut since late January, after what Ukraine says was a Russian drone strike in its western region. Hungary and Slovakia have since been cut off from Russian oil deliveries through the route. Ukraine's state energy company, Naftogaz, has declined to comment on when operations will resume. Kyiv denies accusations from Budapest and Bratislava that it has delayed repairs. The Kremlin says Russia is technically ready to resume oil flows and that it continues to meet its contractual obligations with Hungary.
As things stand, you are aware that the Russian side remains technically ready. We have contractual obligations with Hungary, but following the start of the Kyiv regime's blackmail, deliveries have been halted. Everything depends on the Kyiv regime, whether they will open the pipeline and stop the blackmail.
Hungary's election winner, Peter Magyar, has urged Zelensky to reopen the pipeline as soon as it is functional and called on Russia to restart shipments. He warned that the issue was not a game and said Europe would not accept what he described as political pressure over existing agreements.
What I can say to the Ukrainian president is this: we do not know each other. We have not spoken on the phone or in any other way. But this is not a game. So, if the Druzhba oil pipeline, the Friendship pipeline, is suitable for transporting crude oil, then he should please open it in line with his commitment. And we ask the Russians to feed crude oil into it, because without both sides, it simply does not work. We also have information that this could happen in the coming days, as may already have been announced by various sources. We will not enter into any form of blackmail, and I would not recommend it. I say again, we do not know each other, but I would not recommend that the Ukrainian president go down this road.
The dispute comes as Hungary and Slovakia remain at odds with Kyiv over the suspension of Russian oil supplies through Ukrainian territory.
Well, let's bring in now our very own Andy Mioch. Andy, great to have you with us. Start us off then, please, Andy. What is the latest that we know about the Druzhba pipeline?
Well, Guy, it's exactly what we've heard in the spring package. Ukraine's Volodymyr Zelensky said the pipeline is ready to resume operations. Now, we did have some signals that this might happen this week. We just heard the election winner in Hungary, Peter Magyar, and the future prime minister, saying that he had also some information. Just yesterday, Bloomberg reported that technical tests were scheduled for today to check if everything is up to par, if the pipeline is repaired. We didn't hear anything from official sources on such tests. But we did hear from Ukraine's foreign minister Andriy Sybiha today, before the news broke on the pipeline, officially saying that there are, quote, no obstacles, and that even artificial barriers have been removed for the European Union to release the 90 billion euro loan to Kiev. Now that loan, which was agreed in December, is a vital lifeline for Ukraine to sustain itself, to plug any holes in the civilian and military budgets during its war with Russia, which is now more than 4 years old, and it shows no signs of easing. However, following this disruption to the Druzhba pipeline in late January, Hungary blocked the loan, saying it will play ball when the oil flows resume. The halt of Russian oil also soured Kiev's relations with Slovakia, which had even suspended emergency electricity supplies to Ukraine. The two countries, Hungary and Slovakia, then moved to block a new sanctions package on Russia, conditioning it as well on the resumption of oil supplies through the Druzhba pipeline. There was, of course, a major political change in Budapest following this month's election, and which saw the incumbent Prime Minister Viktor Orban, who has been in power for 16 years, lose by a wide margin, and that also raised hopes that something can change in these Budapest-Kiev dynamics and the internal dynamics within the EU itself.
We also heard from the incumbent Hungarian leader there, didn't we, an appeal to Moscow too. I mean, what do we know, what is Russia saying about the possibility of restarting flows?
Before the announcement that Ukraine's Zelensky made today, we've heard from Moscow, the Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov. He said that technically Russia is ready to resume oil flows through the Druzhba pipeline to Hungary and Slovakia. He used some colorful war rhetoric language, saying that if that can happen if and when Ukraine ends what Moscow called its blackmail campaign, adding that Russia has contractual obligations with Hungary.
Very interesting. Yeah, I noticed the word regime was used as well, unsparingly. Let's turn to countries like Hungary and Slovakia. How are they reacting to the situation?
Well, Guy, I was surprised to see that as of the time of this show, there has been no official response from either Budapest or Bratislava. However, we did hear from the Czech Foreign Minister Petr Matsinka, and now Czechia is in that Visegrad 4 group along with Hungary, Slovakia, and Poland. He said that Hungary and Slovakia will not block neither the Ukraine loan nor the new Russia sanctions package if the oil starts flowing again through the Druzhba pipeline. When it comes to these two capitals themselves, what we did hear, we heard from the Hungarian outgoing Prime Minister Viktor Orban. He signaled on Sunday readiness to lift his veto on the 90 billion euro loan for Ukraine before he leaves office, which is expected sometime mid-May, if Kiev restores the flow of oil to Hungary. He said that his stance has been consistent all along, saying that Hungary's position hasn't changed, writing on social media, quote, "No oil equals no money." As we've heard, the incoming Prime Minister Magyar called yesterday for Ukraine to restart Druzhba as soon as possible and called for Russia to start sending oil through it. When it comes to Slovakia, the latest we heard was last week from the Slovak Foreign Minister Juraj Blanar, who said that Slovakia is ready to block the EU's 20th sanctions package on Russia for its invasion of Ukraine until the oil flow resumes through the Druzhba.
And what did we hear from Brussels, Andy? What's the latest from the EU?
Well, maybe an hour ago, We've heard from EU's top diplomat Kaja Kallas. She was holding a press conference following this Foreign Affairs Council in Luxembourg. She said, let me just paraphrase here, I don't have the exact quote, but she said something to the effect of, I don't want to jinx it, but, and she went on to say that she expects a positive decision from all EU member states on that 90 billion euro loan for Ukraine within 24 hours. She said that the EU must continue to give Ukraine what it needs to hold its own and until, quote, Putin understands that this war leads nowhere. She said that following these Hungarian elections, there's new momentum and there is an opportunity to revisit long-blocked decisions, including those sanctions on Russia, as well as opening of negotiating clusters with Ukraine. All these changes to laws needed for Ukraine to eventually accede to the European Union. We've also heard from the European Council President Antonio Costa, who posted on his social media thanking Ukraine's Zelensky for, quote, delivering as agreed, repairing the Druzhba pipeline and restoring its operation.
Now, finally, Andy, this pipeline has always been incredibly important, let alone given what's going on at the moment in the Strait of Hormuz.
Well, there is some news on the Druzhba, but not this part that we've been talking about. Let's just cover this one. This southern branch of the Druzhba pipeline is basically only important for Hungary and Slovakia, which are heavily reliant on Russian oil, according to the European Council on Foreign Relations. And now this is November last year's data. Budapest and Bratislava still rely on Moscow for between 86 and 100% of their oil supply. There's, of course, another option for both of these countries, and that's importing oil through Croatia's Adria pipeline. If you remember, we spoke about this about a month ago. The key difference being it's not Russian crude and it's more expensive, but that's a path that all the other European states chose. Croatia and its pipeline operator have said that this Adria pipeline, JANAF or Jadranski Naftovod in original, has the annual capacity to supply both of the countries with no problem. Now, when it comes to the other part of the Druzhba pipeline, the northern branch, there is some news. Reuters had an exclusive report saying that this northern part that goes through Belarus, Poland, and into Germany, that Russia is set to halt oil exports from Kazakhstan to Germany starting May 1st. Now, according to that report, a complete halt of Kazakh oil supplies to Germany would remove about 17% of oil processed by Germany's PCK refinery yearly. Now it goes on to add some context, saying that the PCK refinery is one of the country's largest, supplying fuel for 9 out of 10 cars in the Berlin and Brandenburg regions. For some quick background, Germany and Poland stopped importing Russian oil after Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Germany, rather its refineries within the country, started importing, such as RCK, started importing Kazakh oil through this northern branch of Druzhba in 2023. When asked on this report, the Kremlin spokesperson today said they're not aware of a move to stop the oil exports.
Wow, layers and layers of complexity to this. Andy, thank you so much for coming in to take us through that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, after the break, Taiwan's stock market surges past the UK, driven by the global AI boom. Stay with us.
We are in Somalia, a place often used through the illusion of constant danger.
Somalia is already facing security threats from groups like Al-Shabaab.
Currently, Somalia has 3.4 million people internally displaced.
Mr. President, I want you to know that I'm signing now Israel's official recognition of Somaliland.
We are expecting all member states of the United Nations to recognize Somaliland.
We strongly rejected Prime Minister Netanyahu's illegal aggression in recognizing part of Somalia.
A conflict will last. People make so much money on it.
This country sits at the crossroads between instability and order, isolation and connection, risks and responsibility. Inside Politics delves deeply into the heart of global issues shaping our world today. Join me for your go-to source of political analysis from across the region and beyond.
On World Business, we meet the boardroom leaders making market-moving decisions. And find out how leaders are dealing with continuous technological disruption.
As America sleeps, Europe is waking, and the East has begun its day. AnewZ is right here at the center, bringing you the latest stories as they break. I'm Nadia Jani, here with you each weekday morning to share latest world news and the stories shaping our region. Across all platforms and wherever you get your news, we explore the context behind the big headlines. Live from Baku, I bring you a diverse mix of regional and international news, sport and politics for you, an audience that wants a bit more. So join me Monday to Friday for the latest headlines, expert analysis and live updates from around the world. Around the globe and live from Baku, this is Daybreak here on AnewZ.
Welcome back to Primetime. Taiwan has overtaken the UK to become the world's 7th largest stock market, with total market value reaching about $4.14 trillion. The surge is driven by booming demand for AI technology, powering Taiwan's semiconductor sector and lifting investor sentiment. Major chip makers and electronics firms led the gains. The Taiwan Stock Exchange Index opened higher and rallied through the session, hitting a record 37.8 points. Now, the move highlights strong momentum in AI-driven stocks and growing global demand for advanced chips. Well, to break this down, we're joined now by Anna Evans, political analyst, who's joining us from Lisbon in Portugal. Anna, great to have you with us. It's fascinating, this, isn't it? Because if you sort of separate the two giant economies, the US and China, then that cluster underneath, really, it's a fierce competition. It seems that the UK is just sort of slipping down the list, whereas Taiwan is really surging.
One could say in very, very plain terms that this is old money versus new money. This is the old industrial sectors, the traditional industries, versus the AI boom, the AI race, the AI, the artificial intelligence boom, the artificial intelligence, race, and all the geopolitics that is surrounding it. And that's what we see. So in the UK, we see the more traditional sectors, energy, banking, telecoms, older firms. In Asian markets, and let's bear in mind that Taiwan has had this major achievement of surpassing the UK, but it's not just Taiwan. Other Asian markets are extremely important in the world stage, namely China, Japan, and also India. And so we need, to dissect this as a trend that shows how, the artificial intelligence and the technology and the fast innovation pace of all technological industries that surround semiconductors, all industries that rely on semiconductors, this is what it means, that these industries are now commanding, they are now the engine of the stock markets at the global level. So that's what this says, because in real economy, in the street economy, the British economy is much larger than the Taiwan economy. So we're talking about stock markets, not about the real GDP and the real economy of the country.
Yeah, and of course valuations on anything can go down as well as up. It's a very good point. Nevertheless, it's a very positive picture. I mean, what is driving this surge, do you think, in Taiwan's stock market right now? Is it access to component materials? Is it good governance, lack of regulation, access to cheaper labour? What's the reason behind it, do you think?
Well, it is a combination of those indicators. And, if we think that, Taiwan is the producer of advanced semiconductors in the world, and there is a geopolitical global race determining all, the great competition between the US and China with regard to the domain of the semiconductor industry and of critical raw materials that are needed for all IT industries. So what this tells us is that, Taiwan has made good bets on diversifying production, because Taiwan is opening factories outside of its territory. It is also part of the geopolitical contest between the US and China, and the regulatory aspects also obviously play a major role, for example, in European stock markets, because of all the details of regulations that surround it. So all the factors that you have mentioned are really important, but certainly Taiwan's government and its industrial strategy and, the decisions to bring production, out of that single territory, but to keep the high advanced technological research in-house, that has paid off. And this shows that Asian markets can recover quite quickly from major geopolitical challenges. And here we're thinking in particular of the Middle East conflict. So this is also a sign that markets can adapt very fast and respond, really very, very in an accelerated manner to challenges that are posed by conflicting situations. So this is very good news in world terms.
Yeah, as you say, Anna, things can change very quickly. I mean, the AI boom clearly is central to this growth story. How long do you think Taiwan can stay ahead of competitors, and what does it need to do to ensure it does stay ahead?
Well, so far, the decisions, the governance decisions of both TSMC and the government, so the major semiconductor production firm and the government, and there are obviously other technological firms in Taiwan as well. So the strategy has been, very well prepared and preemptive. So here, I would say that Taiwan has been able to preempt the entrepreneurial strategy. The problem is whether, in geopolitical terms, Taiwan will manage to keep its autonomy with regard to China. So in my view, as a geopolitical analyst, which is my core breed, I always worry about, the geopolitical aspects that can really make markets, go one way or the other. So in that sense, the UK is still a conservative, a defensive, and a secure market. So although artificial intelligence is now the big race, the fact is that for those investors who are more conservative and who do not want to risk so highly, then the UK market is still a more stable, ongoing market, notwithstanding the migration of some firms, outdoors. But this is the issue. Artificial intelligence is currently the core of geopolitics, of global markets, of the greatest supply chains, races, and all the critical materials that surround these industries. All these is defining the race between US and China. And preempting geopolitics with a major player like China by the doorstep, that is the great challenge for Taiwan.
Yes, indeed. Do you think that the surge in semiconductors, do you think that gives Taiwan some degree of leverage with Beijing?
Well, yes, depending on who controls the market. So the race here is who has the most advanced semiconductors, and so far Taiwan has been able to win that race, and also who controls the supply chain and the whole production cycle and the logistics that are associated with it. And so this is, the core, the big question mark. Will Taiwan be able to keep controlling the whole cycle and the logistics at the international level that need to be controlled? Because we know that China has done massive investments to control critical raw materials extraction and refining and supply chains and transports, land and maritime transportations. And China has, been a really preemptive actor and very successful in controlling several materials that are really critical and rare earths around the globe, with very high percentages of market control. Well, Taiwan has been able to maintain its control over advanced semiconductors. The question is exactly, for how long, and, whether it can withstand China's geopolitical pressure and interest in, eliminating its autonomy. So this is, a risky position for a very tiny country that at this stage, has a leverage that is absolutely stunning, amazing considering the size and the GDP of this tiny dot on the global map.
Yeah, you're right. It's a very good point, Anna, because of course you can control through investment potentially just as strongly as you can through overt governance and policy. In terms of other investors outside of China, presumably this sort of success is attracting interest from all over the world.
Well, yes, but again, you know, markets and investors adapt very quickly. And geopolitics, again, you know, I must do the disclosure, I am a geopolitical analyst. So geopolitics plays a really important role, you know, in sending markets one way or the other. And so it is a race at this stage. You know, foreign investors are quite interested and have massively invested in the Taiwanese stock market. And, you know, so this is very good news for the country. Again, you know, the issue is, you know, if there will be a geopolitical situation that, you know, questions, you know, Taiwan's situation in geopolitical terms, you know, the Strait of Taiwan's passages. And so far what we see is that by partnering with the United States and by diverging its production elsewhere, you know, Taiwan has been preparing, you know, for a worst case scenario, and so has the US. So far, you know, all indicators suggest that this is a very good bet from foreign investors, and that indeed, you know, with the space weapons race and undersea, you know, explorations and really fast advances in technology that you know, create very new opportunities with regard to monitoring, to military activities. You know, all these new aspects of technology that are related to national security and to military investments, all these contribute to sustain, you know, the importance of artificial intelligence. So we are now on the verge of moving to a fast accelerating space weapons race. And, you know, all military defense equipments rely on semiconductors. And so the industry is really important in national security terms for both great powers, US and China, or for any regional power for that matter. So, you know, we can expect this to continue, you know, this trend of Asian markets where the advanced technologies are being traded. This trend should, you know, continue in the foreseeable future.
Anna, it's always great to have you with us. Thank you very much indeed for joining us tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, after the break, a political crisis deepens in the UK as a famously controversial appointment sparks questions over leadership and accountability. Stay with us.
We are in Somalia, a place often used through the illusion of constant danger.
في الصاق صوت كلا لوالد أنت موجود السنين إلا بلا أنا عن هذا لما
Somalia is already facing security threats from groups like Al-Shabaab.
Currently, Somalia has 3.4 million people internally displaced.
President, I want you to know that I'm signing now Israel's official recognition of Somaliland.
We are expecting all member states of the United Nations to recognize Somaliland.
We strongly rejected Prime Minister Netanyahu's illegal aggression in recognizing part of Somalia.
A conflict will last. People make so much money on it.
This country sits at the crossroads between instability and order, isolation and connection, risks and responsibility.
On World Business, we meet the boardroom leaders making market-moving decisions. And find out how leaders are dealing with continuous technological disruption. Welcome back, you're watching Primetime. Pressure is mounting over Peter Mandelson's appointment as UK ambassador to Washington after a sacked senior official alleged he was pushed to fast-track security checks. Well, the row is focusing attention on accountability inside government.
I'm afraid
Ollie Robbins, the former foreign ministry official dismissed over the Mandelson controversy, says he faced sustained pressure from the Prime Minister's office during the vetting process. He told a parliamentary select committee there was a very strong expectation Mandelson should take up his post in Washington as quickly as possible.
So I'm afraid what that translated into for my team in the Foreign Office, and certainly the handover briefing I was getting as I arrived at post, was what I felt was a generally dismissive attitude to his vetting clearance. The focus was on getting Mandelson out to Washington quickly. Despite this atmosphere, an atmosphere of pressure, the department completed developed vetting to the normal high standard. Because the vetting process is not there to determine fitness for office or reputational risk, it's there to protect national security.
Robbins described what he called an atmosphere of constant chasing throughout January, saying both his office and that of the Foreign Secretary were under pressure to move faster.
Throughout January, honestly, my office, the Foreign Secretary's office, were under constant pressure. There was an atmosphere of constant chasing.
The claims come after UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer blamed foreign ministry officials for the handling of the appointment, saying key information had been withheld.
Okay, to unpack the fallout, we're joined now by political analyst from the UK, Mr. Oliver Dean. Oliver, great to have you with us. Thanks for joining us tonight on Primetime. I mean, just watching some extracts there of Sir Ollie Robbins' testimony, it was pretty damning stuff, wasn't it? The Prime Minister just keeps saying that he wasn't informed, he didn't know. I mean, is it really possible that Keir Starmer can just keep repeating this line and somehow survive?
Well, good evening, good to be with you. I don't think it is possible, and the reason...
Okay,
not the Prime Minister, not his Chief of Staff, not any of his aides were aware of the ongoing situation with Peter Mandelson, were aware of the red flags that were raised. And I think it's important to paint a picture of the context in which Keir Starmer actually entered office. One of the reasons he was so successful in the 2024 general election was that he promised that there would be a change to British politics. Yes. That he would restore order and stamp out corruption in British politics, and that somehow Labour would be this sort of knight in shining armour party that would come in and kind of restore justice. And we saw, particularly in 2022 with Partygate, Keir Starmer, in his position as leader of the opposition, repeatedly lambasted Boris Johnson for claiming that he was not aware that any of his officials were having parties and that his officials apparently lied to him. And yet he's mounting the exact same defence now. And I don't think his MPs, opposition MPs, or indeed the British public are buying it.
It's astonishing, isn't it? And it's an astonishing line of defence to take for someone that, for years before politics, was known as a forensic lawyer, someone whose attention to detail was greater than many others. Because something that we heard there in the Robbins testimony was that the vetting process, as he described, isn't there to determine fitness for office. But Oliver, I'm 49, right? Older than many voters. I remember decade after decade of rumour, articles written about Peter Mandelson, the Prince of Darkness, allegations of dodgy behaviour, year after year after year. It's just astonishing, isn't it, that Keir Starmer would sort of not make any connection between that and fitness for the highest diplomatic post in the land.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And like you said, he was known in the run-up to the 1997 general election as the Prince of Darkness. And we actually saw Diane Abbott, the mother of the House of Commons, just yesterday, rip into the Prime Minister and took the exact same line that you've just put forward, which is that everybody knew that Peter Mandelson wasn't, shall we say, the best of people. Everybody knew that he had a reputation. It was common knowledge, not just in Westminster, but across the country, that he had some sort of dodgy dealings going on behind the scenes. And yet we're now supposed to believe that Keir Starmer had absolutely no idea of this whatsoever, and that he appointed him without knowing. And I think that there is an argument to be made here, which is that the reason Keir Starmer appointed him was that Peter Mandelson was the mentor to Keir Starmer's former Chief of Staff, Morgan McSweeney, and this whole kind of centre-left approach to Labour Party politics, this sort of Blairite politics, and that was kind of formed out of the campaign group Labour Together. And so what many people believe is that Keir Starmer in some capacity owed a debt to this organisation, and so appointed Peter Mandelson as a result of that. We also saw through Ollie Robbins' testimony today that Number 10 also wanted Matthew Doyle to be appointed to some type of foreign ministry position. And these are all people who are, part of this Labour Together, this Blairite project within the Labour Party. And so I don't think that idea is necessarily that far-fetched.
Now, Oliver, we've heard some reports of secret meetings between people like Andy Burnham, Angela Rayner, although I have to say the Labour Party generally tend to be a bit less ruthless than the Tories when it comes to getting rid of prime ministers. But what would the mechanism be to remove the prime minister? Would it be a vote of no confidence or something more subtle?
So opposition parties have already floated the idea of a vote of no confidence. The Liberal Democrats have suggested it and the Conservatives have suggested it as well. But for this to be in any way successful, then there needs to be a significant number of Labour MPs who are willing to topple the Prime Minister as well. And I don't think in the current situation there is necessarily that much appetite for that. When the Peter Mandelson scandal broke just a few months ago, there were already rumours about a potential leadership challenge. We saw when Morgan McSweeney resigned, there were a number of Labour MPs who were secretly launching plots against the Prime Minister, and it wasn't until the Cabinet came out in full support to defend him that such leadership challenges were waved away. But as you say, we've seen over the last few days Andy Burnham meeting with Angela Rayner, and so there is definitely something brewing, but I don't think that this is in itself enough to topple the Prime Minister. What I do think, which I think we need to watch very closely, is that on May the 7th, in just a few weeks' time, the local elections will be happening. Labour are expected to lose a number of councils and a number of council seats across the country. And I would wager that if there was ever a time for the Parliamentary Labour Party to get its act together and to get rid of this Prime Minister, it would be after the local elections. And I think that would culminate everything, and it would be the ammunition that the party needs.
Yeah, very interesting. And what about those opposition parties that you touched on there? I'm thinking of the Conservatives, Reform, the Greens. Presumably they're hoping that Keir Starmer stays, I guess, and this story stays in the public eye.
Yes, a number of people, a number of MPs have said, albeit anonymously or in offhanded remarks, that they're actually quite happy in it, Keir Starmer's saying, because it means that the popularity of the government just continues to decrease. His overall poll ratings continue to decrease. And we've actually seen over the last 2 days, Kemi Badenoch has performed exceptionally well in the House of Commons. We saw her yesterday rip into the Prime Minister, basically pick apart his defence piece by piece to the point where the Prime Minister had no... Robin's testimony today, and Darren Jones, the Chief Secretary to the Prime Minister, had to answer on his behalf. And so, in actuality, the opposition parties have come out considerably well as a result of this. And as I say, in the coming weeks, we're going to have the local elections, and it will be interesting to see how much of an impact, if any, these events actually have on the outcomes of those elections.
And do you think, Oliver, that there's anything here, any lessons here about the business of government? I'm thinking about this, potentially the way in which ministers, prime ministers, are perhaps slightly disconnected with the senior civil servants that actually do the day-to-day running of government.
I don't necessarily think that there is that much of a disconnect. And I think this goes to the entire argument as to which side do you believe? Do you believe Keir Starmer, who's saying that he never actually had any information in the first place, or do you believe Ollie Robbins, who says the opposite? What I do think it says is the relationship with which the executive handles the civil service. The civil service are there to act as political operators. They serve the government of the day, no matter what type of party is in power, no matter which colours that government wears. And so when you're in a position wherein the civil servants feel pressured, which is the term that Ollie Robbins used earlier in his testimony today, to carry out the government's wishes, and the government repeatedly pressuring and calling up senior civil servants and making them do these things, that signifies a breakdown of the British political system, and that is incredibly worrying for any government.
Mr. Dean, we appreciate your time. Thank you very much indeed for your analysis. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, after the break, we'll check in with our correspondents all around the world for the very latest developments in their regions. Don't go away. Okay, welcome back to Primetime. Let's catch up on other stories around the world. Well, starting in Europe, a decisive vote is reshaping Bulgaria's political order, bringing an end to years of instability and fractured mandates. But as a new leadership takes hold with a strong public backing, questions are already emerging over the country's direction within Europe and beyond. Let's take a look.
The election result marks a seismic shift in Bulgaria's political landscape. Rumen Radev's sweeping win, with 44.6%, has decisively sidelined the established parties. Former Prime Minister Boyko Borisov's centre-right GERB party received 13.4%, while the pro-Western reformist bloc, led by We Continue the Change, trailed with just 12.6%. This clear mandate ends a crisis that saw 8 elections in just 5 years.
You should know that Bulgaria will pay efforts to continue its European path, but believe me, strong Bulgaria in strong Europe needs critical thinking, needs pragmatism, because Europe has fallen a victim to its own ambition to be a moral leader in a world without rules.
Radev stepped down from the presidency in January to run, riding a wave of mass protests against the previous government. Now, on the streets of Sofia, voters are torn between the promise of stability and the fear of a geopolitical pivot.
I'm very anxious because he is pro-Russian, as this might be very problematic. But I suppose the people won't let him do like very major change regarding the geopolitical scene.
I believe in him. I see that he's like he will do, not only talk. That's the most important thing in every topic, not only in political topic.
But it is that geopolitical shift that has international observers on edge. Radev strongly opposes military aid to Ukraine and campaigned on restoring Russian energy flows to Europe. In Moscow, the Kremlin was quick to welcome the prospect of a friendly face inside the EU and NATO.
We are, of course, encouraged by the words of Mr. Radev, who won the elections, as well as those of certain other European leaders, regarding their readiness to resolve issues through a pragmatic dialogue with the Russian Federation.
While the Kremlin says it's too early to declare a broader shift in the European climate, Radev's absolute majority gives him unprecedented power to reshape the foreign policy of a key nation on NATO's southeastern flank.
The European Union is set to review bilateral ties between Azerbaijan and Armenia with a focus on advancing normalization efforts and regional stability in the South Caucasus as foreign ministers meet in Luxembourg under EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas.
Then we are discussing South Caucasus. For us, Armenia, Azerbaijan, the normalization of their relationship is extremely important, and we are also going to discuss a new mission for Armenia and how we can further work with their relations on Azerbaijan. Of course, we are also discussing what is happening in Georgia, and you know, our approach to this has been very firm. We are supporting Georgian people, but not the Georgian government that takes this in the wrong direction.
And back to the topic of international cooperation. Ahead of a key NATO summit, Mark Rutte is expected in Ankara for talks focused on alliance coordination and regional security. The discussions come as tensions persist over Ukraine and the Middle East, testing unity within NATO.
NATO Secretary-General Mark Rutte is expected to arrive in Ankara on Tuesday for a series of high-level meetings with Turkish officials. During his visit, Rutte is scheduled to meet President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan, and Defense Minister Yaşar Güler. The talks are expected to focus on preparations for an upcoming NATO Leaders Summit set to take place in Ankara in July. Discussions are also likely to cover regional security challenges, including the ongoing war in Ukraine and escalating tensions in the Middle East. While in Turkey, Rutte is also expected to visit a Turkish defense industry facility, highlighting the country's growing role within NATO's defense architecture. His visit comes as Turkey continues to position itself as a key player on NATO's southeastern flank. Local media coverage of the NATO chief's visit has been mixed. Pro-government outlets have framed it as recognition of Turkey's strategic importance and growing influence within the alliance. Some commentators have noted Ankara's central role in regional diplomacy and defense production as key factors shaping NATO's approach. Meanwhile, opposition-leaning media have raised questions about the inter-alliance tensions, including differences over regional policies and defense priorities. Analysts say that Rutte's visit underscores NATO's need to maintain unity at a time of multiple crises. Officials in Ankara say they expect the meetings to reinforce coordination ahead of the upcoming summit and strengthen Turkey's role within the 32-member alliance. This is Adam Morrow for AnewZ in Istanbul, Turkey.
In Georgia, political tensions are rising as the ruling party moves to challenge several opposition groups through the courts, raising questions about how far legal tools could reshape the country's political landscape.
Georgia's ruling Georgian Dream has filed a new constitutional complaint to ban multiple opposition parties, expanding its earlier case. The updated list now includes the United National Movement, Coalition for Change, Lela for Georgia, and the Federalists. The complaint has been submitted to the Constitutional Court of Georgia and is backed by 89 members of parliament. According to Parliament Speaker Shalva Papuashvili, the move is based on a recent opposition declaration, which the government claims shows coordinated anti-constitutional goals. These include rejecting state institutions, refusing to recognize election results, and attempting to destabilize the political system. The ruling party argues that such actions justify legal measures to protect the constitutional order. To succeed, the Constitutional Court of Georgia must determine that the party's actions pose a direct and demonstrable threat to the constitutional order, not merely political dissent. Legal experts note that party bans are considered an extreme measure, typically requiring clear evidence of anti-democratic intent or activity. Such rulings are rare in Georgia's modern political history, meaning that any decision could set a significant legal precedent. However, the expansion of the complaint is also politically significant. By adding the Federalists to the case, the process may be prolonged, as the court could require additional time to review the broader list of parties. This comes as the original review deadline was close to expiring, raising questions about whether the legal strategy is also designed to extend the process. Opposition leaders strongly reject the accusations. Tamer Chergolishvili, a central figure in this case, argues that the initiative is politically motivated and aims to eliminate dissent. She and other opposition representatives warned that banning parties would effectively weaken democratic competition and restrict political choice. The potential consequences are significant. Analysts note that banning multiple opposition parties could reshape Georgia's political system by reducing pluralism and limiting open political debate. It may also set a precedent where legal mechanisms are used to exclude political opponents rather than compete with them through elections. Nini Nikolaishvili, Tbilisi, AnewZ.
In Afghanistan, humanitarian pressures are building while a surge in returning refugees strains already limited resources, prompting renewed calls for international support and urgent efforts to expand aid and job opportunities. Tamim Bahis has the details from Kabul.
Yes, during the meeting, Abdul Kabir and Arafat Jamal, the UNHCR representative in Afghanistan, discussed the current situation of Afghan refugees and returnees, as well as ways to strengthen international support for them. In recent months, hundreds of thousands of Afghans have returned from neighboring countries, particularly Pakistan and Iran, following changes in migration policies and increased deportations, placing additional pressure on reception and support systems inside Afghanistan. According to the Ministry of Refugees, Arafat Jamal said efforts are underway to secure more funding to address the challenges facing Afghan returnees, adding that an international delegation will visit Afghanistan soon. Jamal also stated that alongside UN agencies, international organizations are working to respond to the needs of Afghan migrants. He added that UN High Commissioner for Refugees is expected to travel to Kabul soon to assess the conditions of returnees on the ground. A key part of the discussion focused on assistance and livelihoods. Jamal said 2 large carpet weaving factories have been established in Herat and Mazar-e-Sharif, and these are expected to create jobs for hundreds of Afghan returnees. For his part, Abdul Kabir welcomed the UNHCR representative and praised the United Nations for its continued support, saying hundreds of tents have been delivered to remote areas, while essential supplies have also been sent to temporary settlements. The minister also described the condition of Afghan returnees across the Duran line as worrying, saying many in the Zakhail and Hamza camps still face registration problems and do not have proper access to services. He reaffirmed support for international efforts to create employment opportunities inside Afghanistan and said the country welcomes visits by global officials working on migration and refugee issues. Tamim Bahis in Kabul, AnewZ.
To Central Asia now, Kazakhstan and Mongolia are looking to deepen economic and energy ties as the Mongolian president visits Astana. Well, potential oil supplies, transport routes and closer regional integration are among the key issues on the agenda.
Kazakhstan may begin supplying oil and petroleum products to Mongolia, with the issue high on the agenda during talks in Astana as the Mongolian president visits the country. The discussions also cover cooperation in geological exploration and extraction. For Ulaanbaatar, this is part of a broader effort to diversify energy sources and reduce reliance on a limited number of partners. For Kazakhstan, it's a chance to open a new export route and strengthen its position in the regional market. The presidents of Kazakhstan and Mongolia met at the Akorda presidential residence, holding talks in both narrow and expanded formats. It's the first visit of this level in nearly 2 decades and is expected to give new momentum to bilateral ties. Kassym-Jomart Tokayev said the relationship is entering a new phase, adding that Kazakhstan has become Mongolia's first strategic partner in Central Asia. Among the concrete steps discussed is the possible return of direct flights between the capitals of the two countries as early as this year. That would make business contacts easier and support closer cooperation. Trade between the two countries reached $133 million last year, but analysts say the real potential is much higher, with volumes that could grow to $500 million. Much of that depends on transport and logistics. For Mongolia, a landlocked country that relies on routes through Russia and China, Kazakhstan offers an alternative path to global markets, including through the Trans-Caspian corridor. For Kazakhstan, this strengthens its role as a key transit hub linking Asia and Europe. That growing strategic interest is already reflected in bilateral agreements. More than 10 documents were concluded during Tokayev's visit to Mongolia in 2024, and a new package of deals is expected from this visit as well, aimed at deepening cooperation. Fariza Kalimurzina, Almaty, AnewZ.
Global energy concerns are back in focus as Xi Jinping underscores the need to keep one of the world's most critical shipping routes open amid rising tensions and fears over supply disruptions. Manor Makdoum picked up the story for us.
Chinese President Xi Jinping has highlighted the importance of maintaining normal passage through the Strait of Hormuz during a phone call with the Saudi Crown Prince and Prime Minister Mohammed bin Salman. During the conversation, President Xi highlighted that the security and stability of the strait are crucial for safeguarding global energy supply chains and ensuring the steady flow of international trade. He stressed that disruptions in the vital maritime corridor could have far-reaching consequences for the world economy, urging all parties to act responsibly and avoid actions that could escalate tensions. Xi also reiterated China's consistent position in favor of dialogue and diplomatic solutions, calling for greater international efforts to de-escalate the situation and maintain regional peace. He emphasized that cooperation among regional countries is essential to preserving stability in the Gulf. The Strait of Hormuz remains one of the world's most important transit routes, with roughly a fifth of global oil consumption passing through it each day. Any disruption to shipping in the corridor has historically led to immediate concerns over supply security and price stability in global energy markets. China is the world's largest importer of crude oil, with a significant share of its supplies originating from Gulf producers, including Saudi Arabia. Ensuring uninterrupted maritime access through the strait is therefore directly linked to China's domestic energy security and broader economic stability. During the current rising geopolitical uncertainty, Beijing has continued to position itself as a stabilizing force, advocating for open sea lanes and collective security to support global economic recovery. Manor Makdoum, AnewZ, Beijing.
Well, that brings us to the end of Primetime for tonight. Please do join us tomorrow, though, for plenty more news and analysis. And from all of us here at AnewZ, thanks for watching.